In November 2024, the Arizona Daily Star published an article by journalist Tim Steller titled, "She Escaped a Strict Tucson Church, Discovered What a Lesbian Is." The article, which is part of an investigative series on William Branham's message movement, provides a deeply personal account of Marissa Butterfuss, a Tucson woman who left the restrictive doctrines of a message church to discover her sexual identity. This article is more than a narrative about one woman's liberation. It is a window into the paradoxes and contradictions of Branham's legacy and ultimately the New Apostolic Reformation. As the investigation revealed, William Branham's cult of personality and his doctrines continue to affect lives decades after his death. Branham's teachings explicitly condemned homosexuality as one of the worst sins. In some sects within the message cult, members exposed for same-sex attraction are branded with labels suggesting that homosexuality is an unforgivable sin. Yet, the message has long been plagued by whispers of hypocrisy, particularly regarding the sexual orientation of Branham's inner circle. Steller's article brings these contradictions into sharp focus, highlighting how oppressive doctrines can shape personal identity and how the very communities that enforce these doctrines often harbor secrets of their own. Steller's article was part of the series Twisted Message, A Prophet's Unchecked Global Sect, an ambitious journalistic endeavor that delved into the origins, doctrines, and global impact of William Branham and his followers. The series exposed the destructive consequences of Branham's teachings, including fractured families, extremist offshoots, and psychological abuse. By featuring personal stories like Butterfuss's, the series humanized the broader investigation, showing how Branham's ideology manifests in the lives of ordinary people. Steller's work also shed light on the cult-like dynamics within the message. Butterfuss described a life governed by rigid rules. Women could not dress or present themselves in modern fashion, and friendships with outsiders were discouraged. These restrictions reflect Branham's teachings on the place of women in society, teachings that have long been critiqued for their misogyny and control. Branham was an outspoken critic of homosexuality, often using his sermons to decry what he perceived as a moral decline in society. His rhetoric painted a binary world of righteous believers and sinful outsiders, with homosexuals often placed among the latter. Yet, research data reveals an ironic twist. Several men in Branham's trusted inner circle were rumored or even publicly exposed as homosexual. The problem was so obvious during his ministry that even Branham himself was accused of having same-sex attraction, which he admitted in 1961. These contradictions are not unique to the message. Throughout Pentecostal and Charismatic movements, there is a recurring pattern of leaders who publicly denounce homosexuality while privately grappling with or concealing their own same-sex attractions. Branham's era was no exception. History has recorded several allegations and controversies surrounding key figures in the movement who presented a public image that was far different from what they preached. The Pentecostal, Charismatic, and other movements that eventually merged to form the New Apostolic Reformation have long faced scandals involving leaders accused of or admitting to homosexual behavior, despite their public condemnation of such acts. These controversies date back to the very roots of Pentecostalism. Charles Fox Parham, the movement's founder, was arrested in 1907 on charges of engaging in homosexual acts with a young man, though he denied the allegations. This early scandal set a troubling precedent that would echo through the decades as other leaders followed a similar pattern of public condemnation and private struggles. In the modern era, numerous influential figures have faced similar accusations. Roberts Liardon, a pastor and author of God's Generals, admitted in 2001 to a moral failure involving a short-term homosexual relationship with his church's youth minister. Liardon's admission led him to step down from his role at Embassy Christian Center in Irvine, California, to seek counseling. Ted Haggard, once president of the National Association of Evangelicals, resigned in 2006 after allegations from a male escort of a 3-year sexual relationship and drug use. Though Haggard initially denied the claims, he later admitted to some sexual misconduct, leaving his reputation in shambles. Lonnie Frisbee, a charismatic evangelist instrumental in the Jesus movement and the early days of Calvary Chapel and the Vineyard movement, grappled with homosexuality throughout his life. While his ministry led thousands to Christ, his sexuality and struggles with substance abuse became public knowledge only after his death, highlighting the tension between his profound spiritual influence and personal battles. Similarly, Bishop Eddie Long, senior pastor of New Birth Missionary Baptist Church, faced accusations of sexual coercion from young men in his congregation. Long settled the lawsuits out of court, but the scandal irreparably damaged his ministry's reputation. Paul Cain, a prophetic leader associated with the Kansas City Prophets and NAR, was exposed in 2004 for homosexual behavior and alcohol abuse, leading to his suspension from ministry. Likewise, Eldon Purvis, a prominent figure in the shepherding movement, faced allegations of homosexual activity that undermined his teachings on submission and spiritual authority. Todd Bentley, leader of the Lakeland Revival, faced multiple allegations of sexual misconduct involving both men and women, admitting to inappropriate behavior such as sending explicit messages, though he denied physical infidelity. Bentley's repeated misconduct, despite attempts at restoration, intensified debates about accountability within charismatic leadership. These incidents expose a troubling paradox. Leaders who publicly denounce homosexuality while privately struggling with or engaging in same-sex attractions. The cases of Parham, Liardon, and others reveal a recurring pattern of hypocrisy that has prompted broader discussions on accountability, grace, and the interpretation of rigid doctrine all stances on sexuality. These stories highlight the tension between personal struggles and public ministry, challenging the Pentecostal and Charismatic movements to confront their own contradictions and extend compassion to those navigating these complex issues. The theological debate over homosexuality is one of the most contentious issues in contemporary Christianity. Advocates for a traditional interpretation argue that Scripture unequivocally condemns homosexual behavior. Passages such as Leviticus 18:22, Romans 1:26-27, and 1 Corinthians 6:9-10 are often cited as evidence that homosexuality is incompatible with God's design for human relationships. For these believers, adherence to biblical authority means upholding these prohibitions. Conversely, affirming Christians argue that these passages have been misunderstood or misapplied. They point out that the cultural context of ancient Israel and the early church differs significantly from today's understanding of human sexuality. Some theologians interpret these verses as addressing exploitative practices rather than consensual, loving same-sex relationships. Others emphasize the broader biblical themes of love, justice, and inclusion, arguing that these principles should guide contemporary applications of Scripture. This divide is not merely theological, it has profound implications for the lives of LGBTQ+ Christians. For individuals like Marissa Butterfuss, leaving a conservative church meant reclaiming the freedom to explore her identity. Yet for many others, the tension between faith and sexuality remains unresolved, leading to internal conflict, family estrangement, and even mental health crises. Butterfuss's story is emblematic of the struggles faced by many LGBTQ+ individuals raised in strict religious environments. In the Arizona Daily Star article, she described how the message's teachings shaped her early understanding of gender and sexuality. Women were expected to marry, bear children, and submit to their husbands, leaving little room for alternative identities or roles. Butterfuss's eventual realization that she was gay was painful, as it meant severing ties with her church, her marriage, and, for a time, her family. After leaving the message, Butterfuss pursued a career in cosmetology, an act she described as a stupid, rebellious decision that ultimately became a source of joy and purpose. Affirming congregations offer a model of how faith communities can embrace LGBTQ+ individuals without compromising their commitment to the gospel. These churches argue that inclusion is not a departure from biblical teaching, but a fulfillment of its deepest principles. For these communities, the challenge lies in maintaining their convictions while avoiding the judgmental attitudes that often alienate outsiders and push congregants with same-sex attraction away from Christianity.